Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anne Gabriel Oreta and I'm about to discuss the continuation of the Title 4 of the Powers of the Corporation, Section 38 to 39. But before we begin, this would be the flow of my discussion. First would be the Title 4, Section 38, the power of corporation to deny preemptive right, followed by the definition and purpose of granting such right, the instances wherein the rights may not be exercised, and other additional information. The second point would be the Title 4, Section 39, the sale or other disposition of assets, followed by the requirements of the validity of sale and other information necessary. Let us now start our discussion. Title 4, Section 38 says, all stockholders of a stock corporation shall enjoy preemptive right to subscribe to all issues or disposition of shares of any class in proportion to their respective shareholdings, unless such right is denied by the Articles of Incorporation or an amendment thereto, provided that such preemptive right shall not extend to shares issued in compliance with laws requiring stock offerings or minimum stock ownership by the public, or to shares issued in good faith with the approval of the stockholders representing two-thirds of the outstanding capital stock in exchange for property needed for corporate purposes or in payment of a previously contracted debt. So in order to understand the Section 38, we need to know kung ano nga ba ang ibig sabihin ng preemptive right. Preemptive right is a preferential right granted for the stockholder of a stock corporation to have the first option to subscribe to issued or disposition of shares of any class proportionate to their shareholdings. So, ibig sabihin po nito, ang preemptive right ay isang preferential right or rather a privilege ng isang stockholder na i-prioritize siya kapag nag-issue si corporation ng panibagong shares na dapat i-offer muna ang newly issued stock sa kanya before it will be made available to the public. So, for example, ABC Co., a stock corporation, has 100 stocks and you own 20 of them, which is equivalent to 20%. Suppose ABC Co. has 10 new issues of stocks. You will be granted the rights of purchasing the 20% of the newly issued stocks, which is equal to 2 stocks before it will be made available to the public. But in this case, pwede naman na hindi mo bilhin yung additional stocks. The only difference that would happen is mababawasan yung percentage ng ownership mo sa corporation. So, ano nga ba ang purpose ng preemptive right? The purpose of such right is to retain the shareholders' proportionate control in the corporation. So, balikan natin yung illustration kanina. Let's say pumayag ka na bilhin yung 20% ng new issues of stocks. So basically, in-exercise mo yung preemptive rights mo dito. Then kapag binili mo yung 20% ng 10 new issued stocks, nare-retain mo yung 20% ownership mo sa corporation. So ano-ano naman yung instances na hindi pwedeng i-exercise ni stockholder ang kanyang preemptive rights? Number 1, if such right is denied by the AOI, which is stated sa Section 38. Pero normally, ine-exercise naman talaga siya sa corporation. Second is when the shares are to be issued in compliance with laws requiring stock offerings or minimum stock ownership by the public. Meaning nito, kapag ang batas na mismo ang nagsabi na dapat itong stocks na to na i-issue ni corporation ay dapat mapunta sa iba at hindi sa existing stockholders, hindi na pwedeng ipilit ni stockholder na gamitin ang kanyang preemptive right. Third is when shares are to be issued in good faith. With the approval of the stockholders representing two-thirds of the outstanding capital stock, in exchange for property needed for corporate purposes or in payment of a previously contracted debt. So meaning kapag naman ang newly issued stocks ay aprobado na ng 2/3 of the stockholders in exchange for property or in payment of debt, hindi na rin pwedeng i-exercise ni stockholder ang kanyang preemptive right. Some additional information. Number 1, preemptive right must be exercised within the period stated in the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws. Number 2, preemptive right is also applicable in reissuance of treasury shares. Number 3, preemptive right may be waived if the stockholder fails to exercise his right after given the opportunity to avail such right, tulad ito ng sinabi ko kanina. And lastly, preemptive right is transferable unless there is an expressed restriction in the Articles of Incorporation. Next is the Title 4, Section 39, which is about the power of corporation on sale or other disposition of assets. Dito medyo mahaba yung nakalagay, so we will be discussing this part by part. Section 39, Sale or other disposition of assets. Subject to the provisions of Republic Act No. 10667, otherwise known as the Philippine Competition Act, and other related laws, a corporation may buy a majority vote of its board of directors or trustees, sell, lease, exchange, mortgage, pledge, or otherwise dispose of its property and assets upon such terms and conditions and for such consideration, which may be money, stocks, bonds, or other instruments for the payment of money or other property or consideration as its board of directors or trustees may deem expedient. A sale of all or substantially all of the corporation's properties and assets, including its goodwill, must be authorized by the vote of the stockholders representing at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stock or at least 2/3 of the members in a stockholders or members meeting duly called for the purpose. A non-stock corporation where there are no members with voting rights, the vote of at least a majority of the trustees in office will be sufficient authorization for the corporation to enter into any transaction authorized by this section. Section 39 says that in a simple sale or disposition of asset, only the majority of the votes of the board of directors or trustees are necessary. On the other hand, a sale of all or substantially all of the corporation's assets, including its goodwill, requires authorization through the votes of the stockholders representing at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stock. So meaning, kung ang pinag-uusapang bentahan ng asset is only a simple sale, board of directors lang ang kailangang magbotohan. However, if the sale or disposition of asset ay pangkalahatan na, so basically parang liquidation na siya ng corporation, it requires authorization from the stockholders representing at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stock. The determination of whether or not the sale involves all or substantially all of the corporation's properties and assets must be computed based on its net asset value as shown in the latest financial statements. A sale or other disposition shall be deemed to cover substantially all the corporate property and assets if thereby the corporation would be rendered incapable of continuing the business accomplishing the purpose for which it was incorporated. Section 39 says that the basis of whether the sale or disposition of asset involves all or substantially all of the corporation's properties or assets is the computation of the net asset value shown in the latest financial statements. A sale or disposition of an asset would be considered as substantially all if the corporation would be declared as incapable of doing its purpose for which it was incorporated in the first place. So this means that a sale of an asset would be considered as substantially all kung hindi na magagawang mag-operate ang corporation based sa kung ano yung pinaka-purpose niya. Written notice of the proposed action and of the time and place for the meeting shall be addressed to stockholders or members at their places of residence as shown in the books of the corporation and deposited to the addressee in the post office with postage prepaid, served personally or when allowed by the bylaws or done with the consent of the stockholder, sent electronically, provided that any dissenting stockholder may exercise the right of appraisal under the conditions provided in this code. So ito naman po yung requirements for the validity of sale. Number 1, there should be a written notice of the proposed action and of the time and place of the meeting shall be addressed to each stockholder or member sent through post or electronically if allowed. Number 2, approval of the majority of the BOD or BOT. Number 3, authorization by the vote of the stockholders representing at least 2/3 of the OCS. And lastly, the appraisal rights of the dissenting stockholder must be exercised. After such authorization or approval by the stockholders or members, the board of directors or trustees may nevertheless in its discretion abandon such sale, lease, exchange, mortgage, pledge, or other disposition of property and assets subject to the rights of third parties under any contract relating thereto without further action or approval by the stockholders or members. Nothing in this section is intended to restrict the power of any corporation without the authorization by the stockholders or members to sell, lease, exchange, mortgage, pledge, or otherwise dispose of any of its property and assets if the same is necessary in the usual and regular course of business of the corporation, or if the proceeds of the sale or other disposition of such property and assets shall be appropriated for the conduct of its remaining business. So yun din pinakadulong part ng section 39 says that first, the BOD or BOT may nevertheless abandon such sale or other disposition of asset even after such authorization from the stockholders was given. Meaning, pwedeng i-disregard ng BOD yung sale or disposition of asset even though they are authorized by the stockholders. Next, the ratification is not required if such sale or disposition of asset is necessary in the usual course of business and or if the proceeds of the sale or other disposition of asset be appropriated for the conduct of its remaining business. Meaning, hindi na kailangan ng authorization ng stockholders kung ang sale of asset is part ng usual course of business, like if magbebenta ng inventories or kapag ang proceeds ng sale ay gagamitin for other purposes or for the conduct of the corporation's remaining business. And that's the end of my discussion. The following sections would be discussed by Ms. Rivalyn Bueno. Thank you everyone for listening.